Starting off this countdown, we have the Alice killings. I've talked about this creepypasta before, but basically it's a famous Japanese urban legend about a mysterious serial slayer. They would go around murdering random individuals. At the scene of their gruesome crime, they would leave a single playing card by the body with the name Alice written on it in the victim's blood. The killer ended up taking the lives of 5 individuals. Well, in 2003, there was a serial killer in Spain that would also leave playing cards by their victims, just like the Alice killer. He ended up slaying 6 individuals before the police caught him. Coming in at number 9, we have the Facebook messages. So the creepypasta I'm going to be talking about is the one titled "My Dead Girlfriend Keeps Messaging Me on Facebook," and it's pretty self-explanatory what happens. A guy's girlfriend passes away but keeps messaging him on Facebook saying random things, almost as if she's like toying with him from the dead. Well, in 2016, Kayla Brown and her boyfriend Charlie Carver were kidnapped by a serial killer. Charlie was killed, but Kayla was kept alive in a shipping container for 2 months. To avoid suspicion, the killer went on both of their Facebooks and sent messages and status updates to not worry friends and family. He said that they were fine and left on their own, but eventually he was caught and Kayla was rescued. Moving on to number 8, we have the Axeman of New Orleans. Legend goes that in the early 20th century, French photographer and inventor Edouard Martel was traveling the United States taking thousands of photos of the places he visited. He typically would hide his camera and set it to go off automatically. That way he could capture real life without people knowing. However, after reviewing his photos, he realized that he captured a brutal serial killer who police could never catch. He was named the Axeman of New Orleans, or New Orleans. You guys make fun of how I say that name. And now parts to this story are true. Parts are false. For starters, Edouard Alfred Martel is a real person, but he wasn't a photographer. Second, the Axeman of New Orleans was a real killer. During an 18-month spree from 1918 to 1919, he killed 6 individuals. So this creepypasta was based off of a real killer. In our 7th spot, we have the Green Man. Now, there are a bunch of different versions to the story, but they are all about a green man with no face that stalks the streets of Pennsylvania at night. Some say he was splashed with acid. Others say he was struck by lightning. Whatever happened to him, it turned his skin green and melted his face. They called him Charlie No Face, or the Green Man. As scary as it sounds, this story is completely true, but it's a really sad one. So Charlie No Face was indeed a real person. His name was Raymond Robinson. When he was a child, he was badly injured by an electrical accident that caused his face to appear disfigured. As a result, he was fearful of going out during the day, so at night, that's when he would go out and he would go for walks. He was completely harmless, but people who encountered him would be immediately frightened by his appearance. Making our way down the list at number 6, we have Capgras Delusion. The creepypasta Capgras Delusion is about a woman named Harriet Starling Malcolm. She ends up developing Capgras Delusion as a result of a brain aneurysm and starts to believe her younger brother is an imposter. He's been replaced by someone that looks like him, but it isn't him. When Harriet passes away, her husband develops this disorder as well and ends up killing the brother. Capgras Delusion is a real psychological condition. Those that suffer from it believe that people around them have been replaced by exact copies. Those with dementia or schizophrenia may also suffer from this delusion. We're now at our 5th and halfway mark with Barbie AVI. Barbie AVI is a pretty famous urban legend. It surrounds someone finding a mysterious video titled Barbie AVI. The video is very fuzzy and the sound is distorted, but it features a blonde woman getting interviewed. In the urban legend, the narrator recognizes where the video was filmed and ends up going to the place. They end up in an old abandoned building where they hear weird moans and whimpers coming from a room. They flee in a panic. Now, the backstory to this video is not real, but the creepy video itself certainly is. Over the years, a lot of people tried to figure out what the video was about. At one point in the video, the girl raises her arm and it's revealed that it's completely amputated. Some people think that the video was about BIID, body integrity identity disorder, and that the woman cut off her arm because she didn't find it to be beautiful. Eventually, it was revealed that her name is Tammy. When she was younger, she was washing clothes with an old school washing machine with no safety features. While the machine was operating, she stuck her arm in to push a sheet in more, and it ended up trapping her arm and twisting it until it ripped off. The video we see is when she's older and is trying to get a job at a modeling company, and it's her interview. In our fourth spot, we have the Russian sleep experiment, another very famous creepypasta, and boy is it creepy alright. The creepypasta is quite a lengthy read, but basically story goes that in the 1940s, Russian researchers were conducting unethical tests on enemy prisoners. They captured 5 enemies that they planned to keep awake for 30 days using a gas-based stimulant. They wanted to see the effects that sleep deprivation had on the brain. And in the end, everything goes wrong. They spiral into madness and then they all die in gruesome ways. Now, I hope this exact story isn't true, but it's quite possible that it was based on the number of real-world examples of governments experimenting on humans, like Project MKUltra, where CIA agents were injecting people with LSD, or Project Sleepless Soldiers, where Soviet soldiers were given a drug that let them fight for days without needing sleep. Moving on to number 3, we have Laughing Jack. Laughing Jack is a legend about a clown-type creature that likes to befriend children and then get them to commit dark deeds, or he even will harm them. He usually slices them open and replaces their organs with candy. Well, in 2015, a 12-year-old girl stabbed and killed her stepmom after Laughing Jack told her to do so. The girl claimed that she heard voices months before the stabbing occurred. She even begged her father for help, but Laughing Jack got to her. These creepypastas may not be real, but this just shows how real their influence is. Coming in at number 2, we have Slender Man. This dude went from being a Photoshop photo to a creepypasta and then a film star. His influence is huge, and I'm sure all of you know all about Mr. Slendy. Clearly, he's fake, but his influence is so real. In 2014, an Ohio woman was stabbed several times by her 13-year-old daughter, who claimed that Slender Man told her to do it. The woman claimed that she came home one night from work to her daughter standing in the kitchen wearing a white mask. She had her hood up and her hands were covered by her sleeves. She then was attacked by her own daughter. She had cuts on her neck and face and was stabbed in the back, all because of Slender Man. And in the number 1 spot, we have Walking Sam. Walking Sam is said to be a shadow demon that convinces people to commit suicide. It's said to live in the woods at the Pine Ridge Reservation in South Dakota. It appears as a thin, tall creature wearing a black top hat. It wears the souls of its victims dangling down from its arms. Here's the thing. In 2015, there was a huge amount of suicides in the area where Walking Sam is said to live. From 2014 to 2015, there was 103 suicides. Some say the number could be higher. One local said that there was more than 200 suicides in only 3 months. That's incredibly freaky. Maybe Walking Sam is real.
Starting off at number 10 now, we have the Alice killings. I'm sure many of you creepypasta fans will have heard of this one. The story goes that for 6 years, from 1999 to 2005, 5 killings took place in Japan. Not just random killings either. Strange, unsolved, and very connected killings. At each murder scene, a calling card was left by the killer. The calling card was quite literally a card. It was a playing card. The cards always vary, but one thing remained the same. The name Alice was written on each one, in blood. Each of the murders were as gruesome and as strange as the next, and despite multiple arrests, the real killer was never caught. That's how the story goes though, although there is not much evidence for it being anything other than a creepypasta. There is, however, a real story that is eerily similar. Alfredo Galan Sotillo was a Spanish serial killer who killed 6 people in 2003. When attempting his 3rd murder, his victim survived and another was able to escape. Sotillo left a 3 of Cups card at the scene. Now when the media picked up on this, he began to leave playing cards at the murder scenes of his next victims until he eventually surrendered to police. He was sentenced to 142 years and 3 months in prison. Next up at number 9 now, we have the Russian sleep experiment. This very famous creepypasta tells a story of 5 test subjects who were given a sleep inhibiting stimulant in a Soviet experiment. Day by day, with no sleep at all, they began to descend into madness. They eventually sealed themselves inside their chamber and covered the windows with feces and torn book pages so the scientists couldn't watch them. The story continues and contains mutilation, blood, violence, and murder, in that order actually. actually. It's not for the faint-hearted. But did it actually happen? Well, not as far as we can tell. Many people do think the creepypasta was inspired though by real experiments conducted by governments. The British military testing LSD on its soldiers, Americans testing mustard gas on their own soldiers, and Japan's Unit 731, which tortured an estimated 12,000 prisoners of war during World War II. Perhaps one of the unknown experiments involves stopping people from sleeping. Moving on to number 8 now, we have the Capgras Delusion. That's the name of this creepypasta that appeared online in January 2017. It told the tale of a woman called Harriet who had an aneurysm that severely damaged her brain. After that, she began to believe that one by one, everyone in her life had been replaced by an imposter. At first, she began to believe her younger brother had been replaced, then her own son. She told her husband that he was an imposter. When she died in surgery, her husband then took on this delusion as well and eventually attacked their son with a knife. Well, if that sounds like a terrifying story, it's based on a real condition. Capgras delusion is a genuine psychiatric disorder in which a person holds a delusion that a friend, spouse, parents, or other close family member has been replaced by an identical imposter. It's a scary condition that can leave a person becoming extremely paranoid and isolated. Perhaps the most scary part though is how poorly understood the condition is. There isn't even a definitive way to diagnose it. There is very little research on how to treat it, and of course no known cure at the time of recording this video. Next up at number 7 now, we have Abandoned by Disney. This is an infamous creepypasta put forward by Reddit user Slimebeast. Now he claimed that many years ago Disney built a $30 million park named Mowgli's Palace. It was supposed to recreate many locations from The Jungle Book, a lush, tropical paradise filled with exotic flora and fauna. Just before the park opened though, everything was mysteriously shut down. He went to go and investigate the abandoned site. He reported discovering terrifying Disney character costumes that came to life in the most scary way imaginable. The details are too gruesome to go into here. While the story has been dismissed as a hoax or a creepypasta, there may be some inspiration taken from real life. Disney does have a number of abandoned parks, most famously Treasure Island, which was closed in 1999. It has been visited by a number of urban explorers who have taken a lot of creepy pictures, but none of some animated scary suits yet. Moving on to number 6 now, we have Polybius. In 1981, a story started in Portland and slowly crept across America, then the world, and then entered internet legend forever. Most of us are probably too young to remember arcade halls with rows of arcade games being played by crowds of kids. Before the rise of home consoles though, these were the places to be. In Portland, kids started talking about one particular arcade game, Polybius. Rumor had it that Polybius was insanely addictive. Whenever kids were finally forced off it by the next in line, they reported feeling nauseous and stressed. Some even had seizures. People started noticing that the game was being serviced a lot more than the others. Once a month, men in black suits would come and copy the machine's hard drive but leave all of the money. This led people to believe that Polybius was part of an experimental CIA mind control program. Some people still believe this to be true, but others see it as just an interesting creepypasta. Now if that's the case, it may be based on some real stories. In 1981, in Portland, a kid really did get sick during an arcade marathon. A few days later, federal agents really did seize a bunch of arcade cabinets as part of a gambling bust. Or they were CIA, whatever you want to believe. Coming out at number 5 now, we have Robert the Doll. I'm sure you guys have all read creepypastas about dolls that come to life and kill their owners. They're extremely popular. There isn't even one that I can particularly single out though. What I can say is that a lot of them are probably based on the true story of Robert the Doll. He's a very real doll that was owned by Robert Otto in Florida in 1904. The doll was named after Robert. Now according to legend, the doll had supernatural abilities that allowed it to move, change its facial expression, and even make giggling sounds. People said it was a voodoo figurine that was totally aware of its own surroundings. Over the years, this doll was passed on to other people, and it's said to have caused everything from car accidents to broken bones, job losses, divorces, and all kinds of misfortune really. You can actually go and see Robert in real life in the East Martello Museum in Florida, if you dare. I don't. Next up, number 4 now, we have The Well to Hell. For a while now, a creepypasta has been going around about the well to hell, a hole that was drilled so deep it reached hell itself. That's not even the scary part though. According to the story, the scientists who drilled this hole also recorded a terrifying sound emitting from the bottom, the sound of all the souls in hell screaming out in horror. Here's a little clip for you guys. You have been warned. Now they say that the hole was drilled in 1989 in Siberia, and that after the scientists heard that sound, they fled and never returned again. The inspiration for this creepypasta may have come from real holes that were bored. One such example is the Kola Super Deep Borehole. It's in Russia, it was drilled as a scientific experiment, and it's the deepest artificial hole ever drilled, reaching the depth of 12,262 meters, or about 40,230 feet. Now just to put that in perspective, most airlines fly about 35,000 feet. This hole is deeper than the height at which planes fly. Think about that for a second. That site was abandoned in 1995 with the dissolution of the Soviet Union, although I've seen no evidence of screaming souls from hell yet, again. Moving on to number 3 now, we have the Slender Man stabbings. In May 2014, the small town of Waukesha, Wisconsin was shaken by the stabbing of a 12-year-old girl there. The brutal attack was said to be inspired by the popular Slender Man creepypasta. 12-year-olds Anissa Weir and Morgan Gieser have become obsessed with Slender Man ever since discovering him on the creepypasta wiki. They began to believe that Slender Man was real and that he wanted them to prove their loyalty to him. By doing this, they could become his proxies and do his bidding. They could also prove his existence and prevent their own families from being harmed by him. This delusion led them to believe that they needed to kill someone to show their loyalty. Their intended victim was Peyton Leutner. They lured their classmate out into the woods and stabbed her 19 times, leaving her for dead. Now amazingly, Leutner managed to drag herself to a nearby road where she was found by a cyclist. She recovered after 6 days in hospital. The attackers were sentenced to very long periods in mental health institutions. Moving on to number 2 now, we have Lavender Town Syndrome. I'm sure many of you guys have heard me talking about this one before in another video. There have been a number of creepypastas going around over the years about Lavender Town Syndrome. Now this one is written in the style of a news report claiming that a number of children in Japan killed themselves after hearing the Lavender Town music on the original Pokemon Game Boy games. Apparently the music for Lavender Town had extremely high frequencies that only children could hear. Some of the children just got headaches and began to feel a bit sick. Others were more seriously affected and ended up jumping from great heights. Now this is obviously just a creepypasta, unless there has been a huge cover-up. There is no real evidence of kids throwing themselves off heights in Japan because of a Pokemon game. What there is though is the story of the original Pokemon anime that may have inspired this story. When the first episode of that aired, 685 children were hospitalized after a scene with flashing lights triggered epileptic seizures in them. Couple this with the high suicide rates in Japan at the time, and it's no surprise that a creepypasta like this was born. And finally, number 1 now, we have the Green Man. For many years, the people of Brighton Township would swap stories about the Green Man. They said he was a reclusive figure of the night. They said that when he was a boy, he wanted to see into a bird's nest. He climbed on an electric pole but slipped on his way down and electrocuted himself. The shock should have killed him, but the boy survived, although he lost his eyes, nose, mouth, an ear, and an arm. When he grew up, the disfigured man lived in an abandoned house away from the taunting kids. He became a sort of boogeyman story, but not everyone knows that this is all based on a true story. The real man was Raymond Robinson. He did electrocute himself as a boy and was something of a recluse. What's not true, however, is all the stories of him scaring kids or spooking them. By all accounts, Raymond was a pleasant man who lived with his family and enjoyed long walks through Brighton Township. Starting off at number 10 now, we have the Slender Man stabbings. This is perhaps the most famous one on our whole list. It made headlines across America and beyond. Slender Man is a creepypasta dating back to 2009 about a tall, thin man with a featureless face and head. He wears a suit and stalks children in the woods. Over the years, it's inspired spin-off stories and artwork, but it also inspired something far more sinister. On May 31st, in the town of Waukesha, Wisconsin, 12-year-olds Anissa Weir and Morgan Gieser lured their friend Peyton Leutner into the woods. They then stabbed her 19 times in an attempt to kill her. They later told police that they wanted to prove their loyalty to Slender Man so they could become his proxies, prove his existence, and prevent him from harming their families. They believed the only way to do this was to kill a human being. The victim was found by a cyclist after she dragged herself to the side of the road. She survived the attack after 6 days in hospital. Moving on now to number 9, we have the Black-Eyed Children. This is an urban legend turned creepypasta creepypasta about paranormal creatures that resemble children between the age of 6 and 16. They have pale skin and black eyes, and they lure people in by posing as hitchhikers or panhandlers. The origin came from Texas reporter Brian Bethel, who first described an encounter with two black-eyed children in Texas in 1996. Since then, it became nothing more than an urban legend or even just a creepypasta. In 2014 though, things seemed to step up a level when a paper in the UK ran stories about alleged sightings of black-eyed children. They revolved around sightings near a haunted pub in Staffordshire. Moving on to number 8, we have Laughing Jack. In 2015, a 12-year-old girl allegedly killed her stepmother because Laughing Jack told her to do so. Laughing Jack is a creepypasta that I've talked about before on this channel. He's a sort of supernatural clown who appears as an imaginary friend to his victims. The games turn south when he guts people alive and often replaces their disemboweled organs with candy. Now, this unnamed 12-year-old girl claimed that Laughing Jack told her to kill her stepmother. Doctors diagnosed the girl from Indiana as suffering from PTSD and dissociative disorder. Her family said their main concern was getting her transferred to a state mental hospital after 16 psychiatric facilities refused her. Her public defender told the news, "This little girl has been failed by everyone. The risk level for her is beyond anything I think anybody can imagine." Moving on to number 7 now, we have Facebook from Beyond the Grave. Now, some of you guys may have heard about a very scary creepypasta that came from Reddit. It was titled, "My dead girlfriend keeps messaging me on Facebook. I've got the screenshots." It's really creepy, honestly. I recommend you all go and read it if you haven't done so already, and it's exactly as the title sounds. Well, a real life version seemed to happen in South Carolina in 2016. Real estate agent and serial killer Todd Colep kidnapped Carla Brown and her boyfriend. He posted on their Facebook pages in an attempt to make it seem like they hadn't been kidnapped by him. Their family and friends didn't know the truth, that Colep had killed the boyfriend and had Carla chained up in a shipping container. The creepiest thing of all though was that some of the last Facebook posts he made on their accounts were lyrics from Hotel California by the Eagles. They went, "Last thing I remember, I was running for the door. I had to find a passage back to the place I was before. Relax," said the Nightman. "We are programmed to receive. You can check out anytime you like, but you can never leave." Alright now guys, moving on to number 6, we have Slenderman 2. That's the name I'm giving to this second Slenderman inspired story in our video. In 2014, there was a story about a mother from Ohio who was stabbed by her 13-year-old daughter in the kitchen of their family home. She claimed her daughter assaulted her after she became obsessed with Slenderman. She told her local news station, "I came home one night from work and she was in the kitchen waiting for me and she was wearing a mask, a white mask." The mother suffered multiple injuries, including a puncture wound on her back. She also said her daughter was someone else during that attack. Moving on now to number 5, we have Cannock Chase. That's the name of the small town in Staffordshire, England, where this story takes place. It's also the same one where the black-eyed children were sighted that I talked about earlier in the video. In 2015, residents started reporting real-life sightings of Slenderman this time. They described him as a lean, shadowy spirit with blood-red eyes. His clothes were Victorian in nature and he visited people in their homes. One woman, Pie Green, said, "I was awoken just before 2 AM by an odd scratching noise in my bedroom. To my astonishment, there was what seemed like a sphere-shaped shadow by the edge of my wardrobe. As I tried to get out of bed and investigate further, the shadow began to stretch towards the ceiling. It was at that point I found myself faced with the most disgusting and horrific creature imaginable. It was about 8 feet tall and had a white face with razor-sharp fangs." I think the creepiest thing of all though is that she wasn't even the only person to experience a visit like that. Moving on to number 4 now, we have the Revolution. In 2014, Gerard and Amanda Miller murdered police officers in a Las Vegas pizza restaurant before covering their bodies in American Revolutionary War flags and a swastika. They then killed another local shopper before turning the guns on themselves when the police pinned them down with gunfire. Neighbors said that Miller also donned the costume of Slenderman when he walked around his apartment complex. He used to go around talking about murdering cops killing as many as they could before they did away with themselves. Moving on now to number 3, we have Walking Sam. This is a creepy story that is said to trace its origins to the Lakota tribe of South Dakota. They believe that Walking Sam is a suicide spirit, a 7-foot tall man, lean with long arms and gaunt eyes but no mouth or nose. They say he drives his victims to hang themselves. Between December 2014 and May 2015, at least 103 people attempted to kill themselves at Pine Ridge Indian Reservation. 9 adolescents did end up killing themselves. The tribal police reportedly removed 4 nooses from nearby trees, with some people claiming that they were actually brought there. Is this all a sick joke? Is it just a morbidly popular suicide spot? Or is there a link that people aren't quite seeing here? At number 2 now guys, we have Pope Lick. Now some of you may have heard me talk about this one in a previous video. The Pope Lick monster is said to be a goat-human hybrid that lives on top of a railway bridge in Kentucky. They say he uses mind control to make people climb to the top of the bridge and then get hit by a passing train. Over the years though, people began to argue that this was more than an urban legend, that the story had an ever-increasing body count. There are 2 confirmed cases of people dying on or below the bridge in 1987 and again the year after. In 2016, a couple from Ohio went searching for the monster and were not able to get off the tracks in time when a train came barreling down towards them. The boyfriend was able to save himself, but his girlfriend was killed instantly. And finally at number 1 now, we have The Intruder. One of the most famous creepypastas out there is titled "Aren't You Glad You Didn't Turn on the Light?" If you haven't read it, honestly, go and check it out. It's a good reminder about how scary things really can be in the dark. I won't spoil it for you if you haven't read it. What I can say though is something quite similar to the story happened in real life. In 2014, a 16-year-old girl from Cheshire in England said she received a text from an unknown number that simply said, "I'm watching you." Later that night, the stalker told her he was going to hang himself outside of her first floor bedroom window. The girl was so terrified that she spent the night sleeping in her mother's room. During the night, she received a text from the stalker saying he was in the house. She didn't believe him, but she was still terrified. The next morning, she went into her room and noticed some of her shoe boxes under the bed were poking out a little bit. When she looked under the bed, she found her stalker was there asleep. Luckily, that gave her just enough time to go and get her mum and for the police to be called.